today's an exciting day, and I suppose what makes it so exciting, at least for me, is that I'm going to be revealing what's inside of these tubs. Now, these are plants I've never grown before. These are edible plants and something that I've also never tasted before. But I suppose the best thing about them so far is that they are still alive. They have survived, or at least some of them, out of what I planted. And they've been here for the last 7 months. So that's a long time waiting for something to grow and to harvest that you don't know of what's physically under the soil. And actually there's another sunflower family vegetable that I'll be taking out of its pot. Maybe should I call it a fruit? Stay with me and I'll show you that as well. Now, 2 different plants here. The first tub with these trailing stems is Mashua, and it could be trained as a climbing plant as well. It will go up a trellis. And this second one is Oca, or a New Zealand yams that it's perhaps more known as, even though it's not related to yams. And both of them are from South America. They both originate from South America, but they have been cultivated for a while now. It's just they haven't been as popular, I suppose, in Ireland and UK because it's just what you're used to eating and the different flavours they exhibit. And even though you could eat all parts of both of the plants, they are still better known as a root crop. So you would be harvesting what's underneath the soil. Now, the Mashua is very closely related to nasturtium. So obviously with the nasturtium leaves and flowers being edible, having real peppery flavour. I just find that these leaves taste much more like a cabbage or chardy, so just leafy crop. But yeah, you could eat them, and obviously in my case now the leaves are tiny. This growth is not great here, but at least it's still alive, so I have some chance again, if I like the taste of it, let's say, to grow it next year again. But as the Oca then is actually more related to wood sorrel, so it's from Oxalis family, and these leaves, when you eat them, they are very sorrel-like, so they're really sour. But apparently, yeah, even the likes of the stems here, you could perhaps eat them like a rhubarb or treat them like a rhubarb. So, and even though they're from 2 different family groups, they do enjoy the same growing conditions. And they hate extreme heat during the summer. They like humidity, but they're also not frost tolerant, so the frost will kill them. And this is why I'm harvesting them now at the end of November, because we have been experiencing some touch of light frost, and as you see, the Oca has been affected by it much quicker than Mashua. But at the same time, they do prefer a really long growing season. And apparently, the size of the tubers or the amount of growth that's going on under the ground is actually affected by the shortness of the daylight. So they do put on a lot of growth, or the main part of their growth, towards the end of the season, which also makes at least Oca really good for companion planting, because it doesn't sprawl as much as Mashua would. So because of that, ideally you would grow Mashua independently. And if you think of nasturtiums, sure, they're rampant anywhere you'd plant them. But Oca at the same time would actually be better behaved, and you could actually interplant that with perhaps some quicker growing crop, or something that's already in ground in spring, but you'll be harvesting during the summer, and that's when you sort of plant your tubers in between them. So that's a possibility. But I have them planted here in 2 big 30-litre tubs, just because I wanted to give them more of a controlled environment, just to see what they're like, and obviously the tubs themselves give them the best drainage possible as well. They are on the south-facing side of the greenhouse, but obviously they're well shaded from the west. So this is east, west, and full south then. But perhaps it's best to just have a quick look back into April when I planted the Mashua, because I did plant the 2 of them exactly the same, and just to see how the tubers looked like before they were planted, and then I'll get them out of their pots as well. I have a tub here full of fresh potting soil or compost, and I'll just sprinkle a little bit of fish blood and bone. It's just such a generic fertilizer really, and I'll just mix it slightly into the top here. Now I have 6 tubers, and I'll just pop them all around in a happy circle, and I'm planting them about 10 centimeters deep, about that much, 4 inches deep. I'm going to cover it up now with soil. As you see, it really is revealing nothing. And with the Mashua, if you would have a mild enough condition so that it can even keep growing frost-free up till end of December, it should increase the harvests. So let's see in there. There's plenty of root growth. Now, I couldn't even feel anything from the side of the pot that anything was protruding, as I can feel that with the oca. But so far, it seems like it's just full of roots. So far, absolutely nothing. So. Can you imagine if there's nothing, absolutely nothing in it? There has to be something that the plants are growing out of. Okay, yeah, I see something. I see something. I spy. So all the growth is absolutely directly below the branchwork. So let's look at the harvest. So you see, this is one of the plants. And I think perhaps this tuber broke off that growth. They're so pretty. They're really pretty. So this, you'd consider this quite a proper tuber. I think in the size, now what I planted this is very similar to it without obviously this longer piece of a tail, right? So this actually physically broke off one of the branchworks. I assume it's of that because there is proper amount of branchwork, leaves, everything on it, but there's just no other tubers I can see that's attached to it. But they are just the tiniest of baby tubers starting to develop from the roots. So I'm only thinking, in case I would pot this one up again, and perhaps I could overwinter it in the house. And then the rest of them, they're a little bit tangled up. No, that's a second one. One, bigger tuber and one tiny one. Now, so this is the final growth, right? And all of this is actually coming out of one original tuber that I planted. It has definitely sort of like expanded itself, because obviously I suppose what I had in spring was quite sort of wrinkly and squishy looking. Now some of the original tuber has sort of rotted off, but every bit of this growth then is coming from here. And there's at least one decent one and another one that has a lot of smaller tubers attached to it, but plenty of fibrous root growth. So what can you do with these tubers if you've had a great harvest of them? Now obviously I haven't. I'd say if I would take this bigger tuber and that guy, I think that's still too small, but you could. Look, if I get 3 tubers out of them. What I thought I'll do, I would use it as like a potato substitute, but in vegetable curries, because apparently it has an aniseedy flavour and it should be really complementing cumin, so which sounds very much anything with Indian dishes. Now I'm genuinely thinking of just taking perhaps this tuber and that tuber to taste test them, and I would just plant the rest of it up in a smaller pot, because they don't apparently store that well. They do need quite humid conditions to store well, dark, humid environment. And if they're small, obviously anything that will lose its moisture will shrivel smaller again. I don't want them to rot if we do like them, let's say. And I'm sure that they will end up just keep growing, or that at least I'll have a bit more of a substantial plant next summer. Once the frosts have passed, I can plant it out. Oh my goodness, this pot is way heavier. Really hoping there's some good harvest in this. Otherwise, I just get it a very wet, soggy soil bucket. Not only did this pot feel really heavy to lift, but I can actually distinctly feel pressure coming from the inside against the outside of the pot. Does that make sense? I suppose it does. So I can really feel this kind of like a lumpy texture. So let's hope there's actually more in this pot than there was in the Mashua pot. Oh, okay. Yeah, your ball is quite similar to those colors. Yeah, it is very similar. Very good color combo. Come on, take it back. Up you pop. Now a slug. This is fascinating, just the shape, how it is, and it's actually one really solid block. Now I assume it's just because of these fibrous roots, but it's definitely apparent that the pot itself was actually not allowing it to, or the tubers to actually grow as far out as possible. It is so compact. And here it is, the Oka harvest, and they are looking stunning. They are just distinctly so happy and pretty looking. And I originally planted 3 colour types of tubers, and I'm just delighted that they have all come true. I believe I had 2 of each colour except the sort of pinky blushed white mix. There was, I think, only 1 tuber, but there is a whole family of them. Where do I see it? I think it's this one again here and here. It's like a 2-toned one. Now there seems to be sort of similar amount of whites and the solid pink, but yeah, the 2-toned ones, at least there are a couple of them there as well. They're just popping through. But they're just so pretty. I can't get over that. Now, I suppose the downside to the colour is that it's not supposed to retain its colour after cooking. But yeah, as just to look at it, it's very, very pretty. Now, exposing them for the sun for about a week after the harvesting is supposed to sweeten their flavour, but otherwise you would end up treating them exactly like a potato substitute or instead of any other root vegetable crop. And apparently you could treat the stems of them the same way as you would with rhubarb. And overall, if you eat them raw, you can also do that. Should have nice crispy, but maybe a little bit of a lemony side taste. And then the same if you cook them, they'll have a bit of a starch, but again, it has this kind of a little bit of a fresher side taste to them. So I think the Oka trial has been a success so far. We just have to taste test them and see if we like them. But as growing them has been successful, as look of them successful as well, because they're so pretty, very, very beautiful. And obviously they came out of one of these big 30-litre tubs. Now, as storage goes, again, you're supposed to keep them in cool, dark place with a high humidity. But obviously with anything that looks so pristinely crispy and juicy, I really don't see any need to store them that long. I'd say just keep eating them, not in big quantities. You could have side effects from them, but they just look really appetizing as they are. So I'd say a little bit raw, a little bit cooked, mixed with other root vegetables as well. It looks quite promising. Now the Mashua and Oka, they do look so similar. Very, very similar, but 2 totally different plants. So yeah, really interesting to see now how do the flavors go. But if you'd be doing companion planting with the Oka, as I said, it's possible because it's not as vigorous of a grower as Mashua is. But apparently you should also do crop rotation with it, especially if you are growing with, say, potatoes, because they have very similar disease issues as potatoes do. So you shouldn't leave them in that same ground over and over and over again. but I don't think it's going to be an issue for me because I do like crop rotation anyway, and I don't grow my potatoes outside in the ground. So yeah, it's all trial and error, isn't it? But now about that mystery, a plant that I mentioned earlier, what that is, and I definitely don't need big area to show you the growth of that because that's in a small bucket. So this little plant here is called Yakon, or Peruvian ground apple. Now I have no video record of it when I planted it, and it's because what I planted was so small, and that's why I picked a small pot as well. But this plant also doesn't like cold at all, so I want to see what's growing inside of it, because I also do feel there's pressure from the root system from inside the pot. So let's find out what's here. And what you're actually eating or harvesting are these storage roots. So the pieces that look like tubers, these are the storage roots. And why it's referred to more like a fruit rather than a vegetable is because you would eat it raw and it should taste lightly sweet, crispy and juicy. Now this plant also likes a really long growing period and does not like frost at all. But in the case of Mashua and Oka, where they could have gotten away with a poor quality of soil, these do like really rich conditions. So they are hungrier plants. For propagation, you don't plant these storage roots, but you do plant them from rhizomes that have eyes, and I'm delighted to see that I at least have a part here that looks nice and healthy, really firm, and it has eyes on it as well. So I can harvest all these storage roots here, and then I do need to mind this part. There's a couple of ways to do it. So one is to fully dry it out as much as possible and then store it in a cool, dark and slightly humid conditions, a little bit like dahlia tubers you would. But other way is that you would just plant that up into just slightly damp soil, and you don't need to keep watering it, but place overall that pot or the soil with the rhizomes in it into a cool and dark position. And you can bring them out then again in March or early April, and then planting it out later once the frosts have passed. When I received a piece of the rhizome, it was quite tiny, so that's why I planted it in a very small pot. But also because slugs do love this plant a lot, and I was being very precious about it. So I was minding it a lot. And so far it has paid off, because obviously it has grown and this does look really healthy. But I do have more of these rhizomes on pre-order. Now it's from a different company, because they were offering a Yakon in a red colour, as if I would clean these storage roots up now, these would look quite off-white, or this kind of a beigey colour. And they had a red version, but because it's a free sale, it's not guaranteed that I'd have it, that they'll have enough to supply to all the customers that potentially were looking for it. And even though I had this plant sitting in this small pot in the greenhouse throughout the growing season, I think just occasionally outside during the very hot weather in summer, but it should actually survive outside as well. So the main thing is just to mulch it really heavily, and our conditions here are like 8B or 9A, so it should survive well in this kind of conditions, but it just needs very good drainage, because no plants like that like to ever sit in a soggy, wet soil. I'm not sure if I would chance it, but so far I definitely would try to keep planting it into pots. And even this little one, like this actually has nice rhizome as well on it. There's a nice little couple of eyes on it. So this is worth it. This is worth to keep, and I definitely look forward to testing this out.